Sextortion is a serious and increasing crime. The threat of sharing of private, personal, often intimate information.
Andrew Wolfe-Murray is a former Metropolitan Police officer protecting public figures in the UK.
If we've hacked your computer, we've got incriminating material about you. If you don't send money, we are going to release that to your wife.
Dr. Frank Farnham has extensive experience of assessing risk, managing and treating mentally disordered offenders.
Now, in terms of AI and deepfake, more and more information can be created. Anyone could be a victim of sextortion.
Welcome to this podcast about sextortion. So I'd like to start by asking you, Andrew, what is sextortion and why are we talking about it?
Essentially, it's a form of blackmail. Often involves the demand for some kind of payment in money is the most obvious. It often involves third parties, so family or friends could be involved, either as the potential recipients of that sensitive information, or maybe they're part of the threat as well.
Like a threat to share it with somebody's spouse or something like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Sounds like an absolutely horrible thing to experience. What kind of people is this happening to, and how do they end up in this position? And conversely, what kind of people are doing this to them and why?
Essentially, anyone could be a victim of sextortion. It doesn't matter on your gender, your age, your ethnicity. It's about control and fear. It's about the information that's been made available. Of course, some people are more attractive as victims in terms of their wealth, their status, whether they're high profile, whether they've got something to lose, as it were. Others might be more naive. You get that a lot from young people, the way they share information online. They also may be more prone to panic and react and respond immediately rather than seeking outside help. And individuals who are risky by nature, perhaps they engage in more risky behaviours, whether that's transactional relationships or extramarital affairs, will obviously put themselves as potential targets.
I see, and as I understand it, you might actually be dealing with a real person who's blackmailing you and sending you these messages, or actually the person who seems to be the person in the image or on the social media account might not be that person at all.
You could have individuals, strangers who are just there for criminal intent, all the way through to big organised criminal gangs. They take up the process of getting that data, getting that information however they can, whether that's pretending to be someone else online and trying to extract it out of you, or sending in Trojan viruses into your emails, getting you to click links, which then releases all your private data. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got individuals who might be known to the victim. They might be a little closer to home, whether they're ex-partners, friends, colleagues, former acquaintances, things like that. So individuals who've actually got that data and potentially some kind of grudge. How they got the data in the first place is absolutely relevant. Did the victim send it consensually? Have they mined it through some kind of, as I say, virus or hacking?
Or do they have the information at all,
Exactly.
apparently? They haven't got a naked photograph, or they haven't got the material they say they've got.
And what we read about now in terms of AI and deepfake, more and more information can be fabricated or created, which leans into that. Ultimately, risk and threat in this kind of context comes down to motivation. Why is the person doing it, and what do they want out of it?
Right, well, Frank, perhaps you can talk to us a bit about, firstly, the kind of psychological effect this is going to have on somebody as a victim, and then what sort of motivation you see in the cases you work on.
This sort of behaviour has enormously deleterious effects on the victim psychologically. The very high rates of anxiety and depression, sometimes even frank post-traumatic stress disorder. Individuals can really spiral out of control and start to believe that the world has come to an end, engage in some catastrophization where they feel like they have no control of this situation. Because initially there's a very strong power dynamic. The individual seems to have all the information, the individual victim feels powerless. As regards motivation, some individuals are going to be purely motivated by money. Organised crime groups will send out mass distribution saying something along the lines of, we've hacked your computers, we've got incriminating material about you. If you don't send money, we are going to release that to your wife. Those individuals probably don't have information about you actually, but it may be that if you had engaged in some risky activity or something coincidentally had happened, that you might make a false connection with and think, oh,
But just trying it on, they might not
on.
actually have anything about you, but it seems real and they seem to have something.
Exactly. Another variant of that organised crime scenario is where a group of individuals pretend to be a person of interest, engages you in perhaps chat and then more and more intimate behaviour, leading to you actually sending an image in the belief that actually you're sharing intimate images with a real person, but actually discovered actually that you're sharing with criminals. From a psychological perspective, the more interesting cases are the ones where the victim does know the perpetrator. Rejected ex-partners may decide that they want to try to reform the relationship in a very strange way, and it's an odd way to go about it, blackmail or sextortion.
Is that really what could be in somebody's head? Like, I'm trying to get this person back into a relationship?
Yes, exactly. And it's almost a parody of the relationship. Having that contact, having that link, and the fact that you're going to respond might be enough to tide them over. And they may say they want money, but in fact what they're wanting is increasing contact. They may just want to cause you pain. They might want to try and share their pain with you.
It's actually their distress and pain
That they are projecting onto you. Threats are interesting. So sometimes people make a threat simply to enjoy the effect it has on the victim. Sometimes a threat is simply a clear declaration of what they're going to do. They threaten to send this material to your boss or to your wife, and that's what they're going to do. And sometimes people will put their threat in first, if you like. They're quite paranoid and they think that you are going to do something to them, so they threaten you first.
So it's obviously really quite a high stakes situation. What kind of advice do you give people?
The number one thing you should do is stop, take a breath, think about what's going on and take a step back.
That's really interesting and actually quite counterintuitive, isn't it? Because
Exactly,
if you're faced with a threat, particularly if you are wealthy and you are high profile, and the prospects for you of somebody releasing information online, could be absolutely devastating.
Taking a step back allows you to get some objectivity, to seek advice, whether that's legal advice, law enforcement, or threat risk managers like us. It's about giving you some context. What I would say is prevention is better than cure. If you can think about your private intimate data in the same way you would with any other personal data, trying not to publish or giving out explicit images, private data, particularly to people you don't know properly. If the person's not going away having been ignored or having been told no, then of course it starts to cross over into that sort of fixated behavior. There are lots of options, but paying straight away is never going to be the right one. That gives off so many bad signals as a starter.
It might just ask you for more.
Exactly, it'll keep going.
Yeah.
And if it's someone who just wants to cause emotional control, well, they know you're giving them all the sort of credence and you're admitting to the value that threat has over you.
That they hold the power.
Exactly. For those organised criminal gangs, absolutely law enforcement is the right way to go. If they're not evidencing that they have any information, that's another telltale sign that they might not or probably don't.
Sometimes they might show you perhaps one thing that they've got, right?
Exactly.
Or other times they might not show you anything. That's because they haven't got anything.
Well, for threateners, there's no risk in showing you what they've got about you. The threat is to show everyone else. So always be wary if someone doesn't evidence what they're saying they've got.
And I think you have to have an honest conversation with yourself about whether or not it's likely they do have material. Sometimes it's useful to sit down with somebody to think objectively about whether or not there's a reality to this scenario.
So if it's someone you think you do know and it's obviously, a disgruntled former spouse or something like that, then your own knowledge of their psychology is pretty powerful, actually.
Yes, exactly. And then we've said the general message should be that you don't simply pay, because all of that usually does is encourage somebody to continue to demand money. But there might be scenarios, and it has to be on a case-by-case basis with very careful analysis, where you were in a relationship with somebody, they're emotionally quite stable individuals, they've made a request for money. You might decide pragmatically that the most sensible thing to do, with assistance from lawyers, is to actually pay them. But that's a careful decision you have to make, because there's always going to be the chance they'll come back for more. Of course. And there's always the chance that actually money isn't the main motivator. Money's nice, but what's really motivating them is continued contact. And by paying them, it's a very strong reinforcer that you're very interested.
There is a relationship.
And you're going to continue to form a relationship, be in a relationship with them.
What I'm hearing from you both is that whilst it's an absolutely horrendous thing to be targeted in this way, and it might feel that you are completely alone and there is no way out and you're going to face public humiliation, actually, if you start to break down the threat and analyse it, the real actual risk might be a lot less than you think, and that there are practical ways of assessing it and managing it. There is hope, essentially, if you are put in this position.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fear and the emotional stress is often completely disproportionate to the actual risk. Having lawyers is not just about treating the risk and the threat, but it's about, think about the contingency. Make sure everything's in place should that information be leaked anyway. Whether it's using lawyers, whether it's using an assessment company or consultancy like ours, just to get yourself an overview and make sure you're not the one who's
in the
responding
firing line,
exactly in an emotional way.
Well, what I'm hearing very clearly from both of you is that when faced with this situation, it can feel like an absolute disaster, and you might anticipate the worst case scenario. But as you were saying, Frank, the actual likelihood of this happening does not match how you feel about it, and it's really important to stand back and deal with it objectively. And I think everyone who's been listening today will clearly have got the message that this is not a hopeless situation, and there are strategic and psychological approaches to it that can really help to manage it. So thank you so much for both of you for your insights.